People say funerals are supposed to be quiet, sacred, a moment where the world pauses long enough for grief to breathe. That's what I believe too. Until the day an HOA Karen stood up in the middle of my father's burial service, waved a folder full of papers over his casket, and claimed the man being lowered into the ground owed her money. That I wish I were exaggerating, that I wish this was one of those internet stories that sounds insane, but turns out to be fake. But I was standing 3 feet away from the grave when it happened. I saw the dirt. I heard my mother cry out. And I watched a woman decide that HOA fines mattered more than death itself. This all started months before the funeral, long before anyone wore black or brought flowers. My father, Robert Hale, was the kind of man who kept to himself. Vietnam veteran, retired electrician, lived in the same house for nearly 30 years in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Phoenix, Arizona. The neighborhood existed long before the HOA did, but about 10 years ago, the residents voted one in. My father voted against it, loudly that he hated HOAs, not because he was reckless or messy, but because he believed no one had the right to tell him what to do on land he owned outright. He mowed his lawn, paid his taxes, fixed his own roof. That was enough for him. For the first few years, the HOA mostly left him alone. He was polite but firm, paid the base dues, attended 0 meetings, and never volunteered for anything. Then Karen became president. Her real name was Linda Whitmore, but nobody called her that. Even before everything went down, everyone knew her as that HOA Karen. She was in her late 50s, always overdressed for the occasion, always carrying a clipboard or binder, always talking like she was addressing a courtroom instead of neighbors. She moved into the community 5 years ago and, somehow, became HOA president within 6 months. Rules exploded overnight. Trash cans could only be visible for a 2-hour window. Lawns had to be cut to a specific height. Mailboxes had to be a specific shade of black. You couldn't park your own truck on the street overnight, even if it was legally registered and insured. My father ignored most of it. That's when the fine started. First, it was $50 for improper trash receptacle placement. Then $100 for unauthorized exterior modification, because he replaced a broken porch light with one that wasn't HOA approved. Then another fine because his American flag was too large and not mounted at the correct angle. He disputed them calmly, sent letters, quoted state law, provided photos. Karen rejected every single appeal. She began targeting him. HOA inspections started happening twice a week, always his house first. She'd take photos from the sidewalk, sometimes stepping just onto his driveway. Once, he caught her trying to peer over his backyard fence. He confronted her politely at first, then firmly. Then legally, he sent a cease and desist letter after she tried to fine him for unauthorized garden decor, which was just a bird bath my mother had bought years before she passed away. That letter enraged her. From that moment on, it wasn't about compliance. It was about power. Karen began stacking fines intentionally. Late fees on disputed charges, administrative fees for sending letters, special assessments that no one else in the neighborhood seemed to receive. By the time my father got sick, the HOA claimed he owed just over $3. $200 he refused to pay a cent. I don't owe her, he told me from his recliner one afternoon. Oxygen tube in his nose. I owe the house nothing but upkeep. When I'm gone, they could try to take it up with God. He laughed. I didn't. His health declined fast. Lung cancer. Aggressive. By the time hospice came in, he could barely stand. That's when Karen made her final move. She sent a certified letter to the house. Notice of intent to lien. I remember the day it arrived. My father held the envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. He didn't open it. Just handed it to me. File it, he said. I won't be needing paperwork much longer. He passed away 3 weeks later. The funeral was scheduled at a local cemetery where my parents had already purchased plots years ago. It was supposed to be simple. Military honors. Close family. A few neighbors who actually cared. Karen was not invited. I didn't even think about her. The service started quietly. The pastor spoke about service, about stubborn kindness, about a man who believed in doing right even when it wasn't easy. My father's flag-draped casket sat beside the open grave. Then, halfway through the prayers, I heard heels clicking on gravel, fast. Aggressive, Everyone turned. Karen marched toward the gravesite wearing a black blazer that looked more corporate than respectful. She wasn't crying. She wasn't solemn. She was holding a thick manila folder and a clipboard. I felt my stomach drop before she even opened her mouth. She stopped right beside the casket, cleared her throat, and spoke. "Excuse me," she said loudly, like she was interrupting a meeting that had gone over time. "Before this proceeds any further, I need to address an outstanding financial matter." The pastor froze at why mother-in-law gasped. Why hands clenched into fists. Karen flipped open her folder. Robert Hale was delinquent on multiple HOA fines totaling $3,217.48, she announced. As HOA president, I am required to notify the estate before burial that these debts remain unpaid. For a moment, nobody reacted. It was too unreal. Then my aunt shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Karen ignored her. "This is standard procedure," she continued. "If the estate does not resolve the balance, the HOA will pursue a lien and potential foreclosure proceedings." She said foreclosure, T.A. grave. Why mother collapsed into tears. That's when I stepped forward. "You need to leave," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Now." Karen looked at me like I was an inconvenience. "I have a legal obligation," she replied. "Death does not erase debt." The pastor found his voice. "Ma'am, this is a funeral," he said. "You are being wildly inappropriate." Karen scoffed. "Emotion doesn't override HOA bylaws." That was the moment something in me snapped. That I told her, very clearly, that if she didn't leave immediately, I would have cemetery security remove her. She smirked. "I'll leave once I've documented notice." She leaned forward and tried to place a document on my father's casket. I slapped it away. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen stepped back like she'd just been assaulted. "You can't do that," she shouted. "This will be noted." Security finally intervened and escorted her out while she screamed about liens, estates, and legal consequences. The service resumed, but the damage was done. Grief had turned into fury, and Karen had just made the biggest mistake of her life, because what she couldn't know, was that my father had prepared for this exact scenario, and he left me everything I needed to finish the fight. The days after the funeral felt unreal. Grief has a way of blurring time, but anger sharpens it. Every detail of Karen's face, her voice echoing over my father's casket, replayed in my head like a loop I couldn't turn off. My family tried to move forward, but that moment had lodged itself in all of us. 3 days after the burial, the certified letter arrived. Notice of lien filing. Final warning. Karen wasted no time. She mailed it directly to my father's address, even though she knew he was dead. No condolences. No acknowledgement of her behavior. Just more paperwork, more threats. That's when I opened the envelope my father had told me to file. Inside was a neatly organized folder labeled simply HOA. Why father had anticipated this. Maybe not the funeral stunt specifically, but the war itself. There were copies of every fine notice, every appeal, every rejection. Photos proving compliance. Emails where Karen contradicted herself. HOA bylaws highlighted and annotated. State statutes printed and bookmarked. And then there was the letter. Handwritten. "Son, if you're reading this, I didn't outlive her nonsense. Don't rush. Don't yell. Let her bury herself with her own rules. Call the attorney listed below. He already knows." Attached was a business card, real estate attorney, HOA litigation specialist. I called him the same day. That he answered like he'd been waiting. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said first. "Your father was meticulous. And very right." Within a week, the tone of everything changed. Karen filed the lien. That triggered the trap, because what Karen never bothered to verify was ownership status. My father had transferred the home into a living trust 2 years earlier. The HOA bylaws required verified notice to the trustee before any lien filing. Karen never sent it. That made the lien invalid. Worse, it made it illegal that we responded with a formal notice of violation, citing wrongful lien filing, harassment, and emotional distress, including documented witness statements from the funeral. Yes. Multiple people had written sworn statements. The pastor, cemetery staff, neighbors. Even one HOA board member who had attended the service and quit the board the next morning. Karen ignored it. She doubled down. She sent another letter threatening foreclosure. That's when the lawsuit was filed. The complaint was brutal, wrongful lien, intentional infliction of emotional distress, abuse of authority, harassment, defamation of estate, violation of state HOA statutes, and yes, funeral disruption. Karen received the papers at her home. According to a neighbor, she screamed so loud the street heard it. The HOA board panicked. Emergency meetings were called. Emails flew. Board members began resigning. One by one, they distanced themselves from Karen, claiming they had no knowledge of her actions. But emails proved otherwise. She had CC'd them on everything. The discovery phase destroyed her. Turns out Karen had selectively enforced rules. Dozens of homes had violations she ignored because they were her friends. Others were fined aggressively, and my father wasn't the only target. He was just the one who fought back the longest. Depositions were scheduled. Karen showed up confident, smug, dressed like a CEO again. That confidence lasted 40 minutes. When the attorney played the video, yes, someone had recorded the funeral. Clear audio, clear visuals. Karen standing beside the casket, reading out HOA fines. The room went silent. The court reporters stopped typing. Karen's lawyer rubbed his forehead. When asked if she believed her actions were appropriate, Karen said, under oath, the HOA's interests must always come first. That sentence became famous. Local news picked it up after a leaked recording made its way online. HOA president disrupts veteran's funeral over fines. The backlash was immediate. Sponsors pulled. Board members resigned publicly. The HOA management company terminated their contract. Then the fines hit Karen. Personally, the court ruled the lien invalid and awarded damages to the estate. But it didn't stop there. Punitive damages were added. Emotional distress damages were added. Legal fees. The total judgment exceeded $87,000. Karen was ordered to pay personally due to willful misconduct. She tried to appeal. Denied. Then came the criminal side. Turns out impersonating legal authority at a funeral and threatening foreclosure without proper standing violated multiple statutes. She wasn't arrested, but she was fined heavily and barred from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years. The HOA itself collapsed within 6 months. Dues skyrocketed to cover legal fallout. Homeowners voted to dissolve it entirely, and my father's house remains untouched. The lien expunged, the record cleared, and the cemetery? They banned Karen permanently. AS for her. She sold her house quietly at a loss. An oh goodbye email. No apology. Just gone. Sometimes I visit my father's grave and think about that day. About how one woman thought rules mattered more than humanity. She was wronged at my father was right, and death didn't erase debt. It revealed character. If you ever wonder how far entitlement can go, remember this story. Because there are lines you never cross, and some moments where silence is the only acceptable rule. And if you think power gives you permission to trample grief, sooner or later, the law will remind you exactly who you are. Because even Karen learns this truth eventually. The HOA does not outrank the grave.